You're here to study Bridgman. This is recording 8 on bones from our 12-session Summer Bootcamp 2020. And this is the Bridgman Figure Drawing Bootcamp with you and I, and there we are. Yesterday we covered a lot. Today, skeleton and bones. 2 projects. One is to memorize all the bones if you don't already know of them. Some of you say, look, I know the bones. I know their names. I know their proportions. Then you don't have to do project 1. You get to move right on to project 2, which is the advanced project. But you cannot do project 2 very well unless you know that the bones exist. So we'll spend a good hour in our session today on the names of the bones, the proportions of the bones, the forms of the bones, and how important skeletons are to all of this. But let's go back to yesterday. Yesterday you had 2 projects. Analyze poses as architecture, 4 to 12 of your favorites, Minecraft them into block forms, and assemble them or simplify them into moldings, and then if you can, light them. And then try reversing the light. There was another project, is to put tracing paper down and get wild with a bunch of 1-minute drawings, maybe even less than 1 minute, so that you get past worrying about proportion. Worrying about proportion kicks in a part of your brain that means, I'm afraid, I'm on stage, what if I get it wrong? And if you take away the worries, that saying about dance like nobody's watching, that's what this was about. Well, let's start with, we're going to look at everybody's work from the crit sessions, but we're going to limit them to about a minute or less apiece, so that we at least get a smattering. Those of you who are doing the assignments but not getting feedback on them, if you want to look at this, it can give you insight. I know that they're kind of small on the screen, but you can see them. And I have some things to say that can be useful for everybody. When you see the smattering of what people do, it can inspire you and help you steer. Luca, it is so exciting to see this for a number of reasons. But one is, this kicked you into a mode of play. You know enough about forms to play. And here's another thing it did. Look at this. Y'all notice that in the history of art, when innovations happen, and innovations, though some people are not thrilled about the innovations in the 20th century, but the 20th century was filled with art movements that happened the way music styles started to change, because recording and seeing people's work all over the world meant that we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. But you know, when you see how Cubism and Fauvism and other isms happened in the 20th century, there were some pretty exciting things. Part of what makes this happen, great big claim here, part of what makes this happen is individual artists screwing around, messing around and saying, hey, you could do this. Read about how Kandinsky moved toward non-objective art, and you'll get the idea. This is a cool-looking drawing. These are cool-looking drawings. This could be fun. May you continue to play. We'll talk more later. Brendan, that's exactly what I was encouraging you to do. Because those lines are like a kid dancing. And your source material. Folks, if you look over on the right of the screen and you aren't inspired, well, maybe you're just waking up. Maybe you're just waking up. Good job, Brendan. Etienne, this was fun to do. Well, as soon as you tell me that, I've got about a 40 or 50% increase of likelihood that there's going to be something worthwhile in there. Not always. Not always. But you did a good thing with the moldings. Everybody, this is broken into 3 values. You've got the darks, the midtones, and the light portions. And you did it all by hand, it looks. Yeah, that makes you think about planes. Okay, let's keep going. Etienne, good work. Olivia, hi. I decided to focus on the overlays to help loosen my drawing up, and I had a lot of fun. Well, there's a common theme here about having fun. The ones on the left are from Bridgman. I use tracing paper for them. The ones on the right are for observation without tracing, using the same idea as the overlays, 1-minute poses, and not taking the pin off the page. I tried the figure as architecture, but I wasn't sure. Okay. To do this from Bridgman on tracing so that you don't have to worry about proportions, and then to dare to take away the safety net. Well, I got to teach a kid how to ride a bicycle, and we started with training wheels. And it was interesting that there comes a point where you get your balance enough to not need. The training wheels usually have a little play, but to see that there comes a point where you don't need the play anymore. I'm daring enough to where I could fall over, but it's going to work. That's the idea. Tracing is training wheels. Take them off, and sometimes he didn't even know that the training wheels were still there because he didn't need them. That's the idea. You get daring. Phoenix. Sergeant Vandruff says more straight lines. I did say that, and I get the meta joke. I understand the wet noodle posture. More than one person has we don't need to dwell on that. Good, you did it. Now, Phoenix, good work. The chiseling up here, useful. I want to tell you one more thing. This is for everyone. If you just choose 2, not more than 3 values, that's wise. And if you decide that a corner, which has an abrupt plane break, is going to deserve a gray in there, that's an abrupt plane break. As soon as you've got a gradual plane break, we want to be specific. There can be a gradation of dark to light, but it still needs to be a gradation of dark to light, or light to dark, or light to midtone, or midtone to dark. And the reason why is that core shadow, which is the way to be trained in your early, you may abandon core shadows. I'm going to take an aside on this about lighting, because I meant to say this yesterday, and I didn't. The single source light of the sun and the reflected light of the sea or the moon or whatever else as a sort of philosophical archetype of how to light. I mentioned that even if that weren't the case, that we've got these big nature archetypes, it's still the best light for showing form. However, you do not always use that light. Even if you have good fills and pretty ambient and diffused key light, like an overcast day. You see, you're still being lit by sunlight when it's an overcast day, but sunlight's just coming from all over the sky, and so there's no hard shadows like there is when there's direct sunlight. Even when you do that, you've still got a light side and a shadow side. There are times when an artist wants to eliminate almost any look of three-dimensional form. Fashion photography often does that. It makes a person almost look like a coloring book because the light's coming generally from the front, and as things go away, they get darker. You would not want to use core shadows and reflected light if you are doing production design for a feel-good sitcom, typically. The Carol Burnett Show was such a great example of production design. Very soft ice cream, pastel, sherbet, open ambient light in there. And it just feels different from this. Now, that was an aside. That was an aside to give you permission not to use light side and shadow side and a core shadow in between them for emotional purposes of design. It is not a reason to avoid this in your training. And as soon as I'm going to erase everything I've got up there, as soon as this value smudges around, see, that is supposed to be a pretty straight plane. Why is the light modulating on there? There may be a reason. There may be a reason, but in your training, get rid of that and just stick this simply until you start to get ideas for the difference between the hard plane break and the soft plane break in which you gradually make the transition. Okay, I hope that was useful. That's a leftover from yesterday's light and shade talk. But part of this was to light them, and then if you can, reverse the lighting. And you did a good job by going for the straight lines. Clarita, good work. I bought some new materials after the talk about it the other day, so I tried microns and a Pentel brush. So happy with the new materials. The blue ones are gouaches. This is the way. This is the way. 2 or 3 tones. Yay, yay, yay. Lily Penelope Watson. Lily. This was what I was talking about. This is it. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. Where would that line go? Well, if this line is going to go out there like that, and that one's going to go out there like that, actually, if we see more of this, that one might even be straighter than this one, but that's okay. Whichever way this goes, it's going to be pretty straight because that one goes that way, that one goes that way, ones in between would go like this, and then it's going to go down. But you've got a plane break. Let's start again here. You've got a side plane, a beveled plane, another side plane. Over here, there's probably a side plane that's foreshortened or going back over to the other side. A bevel plane down like there. You're wedging things in. We're going to spend a good deal of time with how this wedge happens next week with that hip joint. Good work, Penelope. We'll talk more about it later. Let's move on. Sudipta. I tried to listen to the advice of loosening up a bit. I looked into comic book art and manga. I looked into animation to learn about simplification. Good. You're doing the work. I struggle thinking of characters as architectural. I prefer thinking of them as machinery. Well, Jonathan, you're in luck. We're going to do that in the next today and tomorrow, actually. I don't quite understand the molding exercise. Isn't that just like carving a flat silhouette out of the side of a box? How do I express the leg coming toward me? You're asking me a question that seems like you're doing it. There is the leg coming toward me, and there is the chiseling of the leg to say that it is now a block, and we're going to do that a lot for tonight's homework as you turn these skeletons into basic forms. We're going to do that with every bone you can do. Okay, I think we got 2 more here. Danielle, you experimented with the complexities of wedging and lighting. Some of my face shapes feel too complex. Well, yeah, some of them feel like they're complex and they got a little out of your hand. But let's look up here. Let's see if I can do this. Hang on. That, today and tomorrow. The upper arm, really? The upper arm as just that? Yeah. The lower arm is just that? Yeah. Oh, looks like it's 2 forms there. Why is it 2 forms? We're going to talk about that even today. There's 2 bones in there, and so there can be a turn. Not quite like that, but that's where we are headed towards simplifying the bones into forms. Romana, beautiful. Great. Okay, folks, that's it for the last 20 hours work. And doing this kind of thing. Look how that tells us this leg is coming toward us, and the other one is going away from us. And look at how it also does another thing. Remember this. The other thing it does is it gives a rhythmic line that helps the graphic design flow together. Did you find that when you did these scribble drawings, that there was an inclination to just scribble around like this? And just doing that, you might find good lines of continuity. But I've got to tell you, when you do this a while and you've got somebody critiquing, here's what you're going to find out that animators talk about a lot. You're going to find that a line like that and a line like that and a line like that, a long line, can help give grace. The scribbling to discover, the initial lines being macro. They may not be the right proportions, but being the right proportions isn't the most important thing in a gestural line. We'll see that in a moment here. Now let's get to Bridgman. What have we got? Well, we've had a lot of stuff. We've got the weight probably coming down about there. A little more on this foot than that foot. How do we know? Oh, the bulk of it looks like it. What else have we got? Look at this line. And this line. And this line. That tells us that he's not only thinking of a block, he's thinking of a block. Watch this. That has a little belly that sticks out like that. And that was what I was getting at yesterday with that wedging, that interlocking thing, is that form that I was showing was like an abdomen going down into another three-dimensional form. And look at the subtlety of it there. And the other stuff, the big forms, but what about this? And what about this? And we haven't really talked about this. We will tomorrow. We're going to talk about that and that, the muscles. But here's what we're going to be dealing with today. We're going to take some time with the knees. Why would we take the time with the knees and neglect all of this stuff in here? I'm going to look at the chat just to see if anybody knows why we're going to make a big deal about the knees. I'll give you a hint. We're going to make a big deal about the feet today. We're going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes on the feet. Yeah, knees are hard. Feet are mostly bone on the top. We'll spend some time with the wrist, I trust. We'll spend a little time maybe with the shoulder blades. And we did the head yesterday. We're definitely going to go back to the head. There's another reason, David, is it's good to see the wedged forms. Now, let me reorient us. Generally, bones as forms, a lot of the bones, 60, 70% of the bones, you don't even care about what they're shaped like, particularly because they are just not going to affect the figure that much. But some parts will. The skeletal foundation and the landmark points are what we're going to make a big deal of. Now, that was to orient you for where we are. I think we should start by looking at how Bridgman treats the skeleton. What do you think of all of those Bridgman skeleton drawings in the book, I wonder? I ask rhetorically and facetiously. Bridgman hardly has any skeletons in the book. I know this because I've gone through every page of the book. And I don't even know that there was a complete skeleton anywhere in the book, but it's okay. Here's what he gave us. He gave us something really useful. Watch this. He gave us that. You gotta be kidding me. That's a Bridgman skeleton? Yeah. That's a Bridgman skeleton. And he's letting us know that the femur starts there. And let's see, the femur is 3 balls of the head long. So there it is, 1, 2, 3. Whoa, it turned into 4. I don't know why it turned into 4. But let's just say this guy has a particularly long leg. Well, then the other leg should, boy, that looks like an awful short leg. But we do know that the lower leg should be a little less, what is going on with this? Let me tell you what's going on with it. When Bridgman did these drawings, he didn't measure proportion, and he hardly cared. He was in a mode of this person has all their weight to speak of. There is some weight that's being distributed forward through motion, but all the weight to speak of is going right down there on that foot, which means that this person might have just bounced down a little bit because when they lifted this leg up, their weight knocked them down, or they might be ready to spring up because they're going to leap. They certainly look like they're in motion. And Bridgman, when he was doing this, if he had not been in front of a classroom, might have made grunts. That's gesture. This person looks to me like their knee might fall down and hurt, and they'd better really, they tripped, and they've got to throw that foot out quickly. That's the purpose of this. These are little gestural skeletons that we don't take too seriously for proportion. However, are they anatomical? Well, it depends. It depends on how you define anatomical. When a child first draws its mommy, or whoever else in its family. Here's what it does. It draws a shape like this, and it puts the eyes in there and the mouth. And watch this. It takes the arms right out of the head and pulls the legs right out of the head, because it's had songs sung to it about its fingers and its toes. And that's what they do. And then when you watch as they become more sophisticated, they will do a separate part for the body and a separate part for the head, and they'll learn to take the arms out of the body. That means they have learned anatomy. Eventually, when they get more sophisticated, they add an upper arm and a lower arm, and by the time they get to the point where they're adding a hand body and thumbs, they've simply grown in their knowledge of anatomy. Now, that's what I mean when I say these are anatomical, because we decided on the first session that we're going to do a lot of terms today, and you'll have to take notes. We're going to get to a skeleton. We don't need a term for the head, because you know the head. Head, thorax, pelvis. Upper leg, that's going to be the femur. Knee. Lower leg, that's going to be two bones. There's one upper leg bone, two lower leg bones, and then a network of bones here. Tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. Well, that covered a lot. What about the arm? The arm is going to have a shoulder girdle. That's a set of bones right there. Then it has one upper arm bone, the humerus, just like we have one upper leg bone. Watch this. Two lower arm bones, because they can spiral around each other, and then a network of bones, a carpal mass, metacarpals, and phalanges. That's what we'll study today. That's anatomy, but let's begin with unfinished business about the head. When Leonardo da Vinci did that cross-section of a skull over there on the left, that did not help him to draw a figure out of imagination. That is a scientific illustration. The inside of the brain case, the cranium, does not help you draw a figure. So if you're saying, I'd really like skeletons like this, and when Bridgman gives me a skeleton like that, it's just not enough for me. Actually, skeletons like this may be overkill. That is a scientific illustration doing research. That is him. They didn't have anatomy books like we do. He was doing his own stuff. And he was doing it on a sophisticated level. But knowing this drawing, copying this drawing and memorizing it will hardly help you to draw a head. What about this one? The head as architecture. This is called a side elevation. What's important about it? Da Vinci's famous way of dividing the head is that it's 7 eyes tall. So if an eyeball is about like that, and that's an eyeball, one eyeball down is where the plane break, more or less, of the widow's peak happens on that skull. That's where the hair, if you have hair, starts to grow, typically. Okay, one eyeball. The whole forehead is 2 eyeballs, a little stretched out there. The nose from the glabella, that's that little part of the brow that goes down, to the base of the nose, the whole thing is 2 eyeballs. The remainder of the muzzle, 2 eyeballs. That is so inconsistent on human heads, but it is so useful, because here's what it gives us. It gives us go an eyeball down and then divide the face into 3 more or less equal parts. Okay, that's a height measurement. What about a depth measurement? If the brow lines up horizontally on a box with the top of the ear, and the base of the nose lines up with the base of the ear, and the ear happens on a 6-eye deep box at an angle behind there, that is useful for drawing a head from imagination. These other ones, I'm not going to deal with here. It'll take too much time. I want to make a point. Bridgman sure looks to me like he's using that system. Let's see. One eyeball down. 2 eyeballs for that. If it's good enough for Leonardo, it's good enough for George. Leonardo is taking a forehead that is very organic looking. That curve looks like it's a real frontal eminence and real bumpy bone that happens on old guys' heads. Bridgman isn't that interested in those little subtleties. Bridgman is saying right there, I'm going to make a deliberate plane break to chisel it up because I like that chiseled rock look. The glabella goes back in, the nose goes out. A great deal of turning it into straighter lines. And what do we got? We got 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Then he runs that back, and sure enough, it lands at the base of the ear. And he runs the eyebrow back or the eye, and it lands at the connecting point of the ear. And that happens if you look at it from the front. But watch my lines. If that's a cheekbone, there's a whole lot of space that goes back. If that's a cheekbone, it goes all the way back to there. So you might have little compressed shade lines. And is that so that we can draw heads from the side and the front and a 3/4 that's level? No. Although it does do that. There's our divisions. Put it into 3/4. And we may have our width lines running off to a right vanishing point and our depth lines to a deep vanishing point. But look what he's showing us. Eyebrow line or eye line goes to the top of the ear. Watch this. Over here. Goes straight across, but what we can't tell is that it still looks like it's going straight across, but it's going from that point seriously back. From this point, seriously back. Can't tell it from the front. Now, when you look at this plate in the Bridgman book, you'll understand something. And you'll see that he has many drawings in there that do this. What's that tell us? Now, he's changed the proportions. Look how now this nose, which would be at the base of the ear there, has a great big area for the mouth. And sort of a compressed area in there for the eyes. More like a cat's head. But he's telling us the base of the nose and the base of the ear are on the same height line. So the eyebrow line, in this case, would be way up there. And now we find that level is relative. Here we've moved the nose down. So when it goes back to the ear, it goes up. The top of the head, it goes down. How far can we go with that? Well, as soon as you take the level base of the nose and lift the box up, as you go to a corner, it's an invisible corner. It's as if it were in a block, then you'll go down there and you'll find the base of the ear now is actually on the paper below. But if you tip this, pull that nose down, and you find that corner, now that could go pretty seriously up. Let's just do it. We're looking down more on this now. And if that nose is here, we'd come across there and then go up to find that base of the ear. Okay, I don't know that I'm going to belabor that because it's in the book. And you can copy those, but if you never understood what was going on, here's what's going on. The eyebrow line or the eye line, depending on what you use, and the top of the ear or the top connector of the ear are level, but on a block One is on the width line, which may be going in one direction. The other is on a depth line, which may be going the opposite direction. And the base of the nose lines up with the base of the ear. That can be a quick way to get control of the form. I'm going to stop. Why, Marshall? Just here to make it easier. I just wanted to ask about Bridgman's construction line. Good question. Okay, I didn't say this, and I should have said it the first day. I taught from this for a few semesters, and I never understood what he was saying in the numbers of those lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. And one time I sat down with a good cup of coffee and spent as much as that caffeine rush would allow me to do to be sure I would know it. And I came into class and I said, I can't figure it out. And one of my students, she was a student at the university right up the street, who was one of the smartest students I've ever had. She was on top of everything. And she said, you can't figure it out. It's not figure outable. And that was 20 years ago, and I haven't tried since. Everybody's told me this. The descriptions in the book can confuse you. They will not line up. Also, some of the measurements don't line up. I guess that's why I took the time in our class to go back to this. I hope that what I've given you is enough to get you started, because he's got lots of pictures of those things in there. He's got a head from the front. And he's got it planed up like that, like we already saw, but there's a different one. And then without even doing it 3/4, he tips it up like this, and he's not even swiveling it to the side. And he shows that if that nose comes up to here, we would go like that. Now watch, we would go back over to the unseen side, and we take the nose out of that hidden part down there. And then it looks like we're looking up at it. And you can do the opposite. You can look down at it like this without even giving the 3/4 view. And then if you put the nose down here, you'll run over to there, and then you'll go up on that line system, and you'll find that the ear is going to be significantly higher now. And that makes you feel like you're looking down at it. And all we did was just place a few little landmark points. Now we see the top of the head. Here we'd see underneath the chin. Those are really simple ways to get a cartoon head to go up and down. And if you spend 3 or 4 hours with his cube heads without trying to understand them too much, just get about as much as I've given you here, that will help. Let's go back. Let's wrap up neck and head structure with this. He's got a baby's face that he turns into molding where it's the sagittal contour line just goes like that on the center. And so you get softer shading on that gradual plane. Here, he's giving you abrupt shading, and then you would have softer shading from dark to light in this case because it's a concave. In fact, if light was coming from there, you'd have a cast shadow obliterating this whole thing. He's taking that out. But look what we've got here. This is where the thinking starts to get challenging. Can you find that line over on the other side? And look at, he's not consistent. He didn't actually do this. If this cheek is this wide, how come the other cheek doesn't go out there further? How come it doesn't do something like that, where we've extended that plane out there? Bridgman is not where you go for precision. Look at the difference. I'm going to erase what I did so that you'll see. I'm trying to make you see that this goes out there and wide and wraps around. He didn't include that, but it's still a cool looking face. If you want to get precise at this, draw all the way through to the other side. And if that's there, find out where that other one hooks into it. Like that. All right. Constructive Anatomy. Page 1. We're moving into the skeleton as foundation and constructive anatomy. What's he say on page 1? I'm going to give you the shortest synopsis that could be given of this. It'll take a few sentences, but I'm going to sum up what he says. Page 1, synopsized. Bones hold things up. Ligaments hold it together. The whole body is machinery. He specifically mentions hinges and levers. Muscles move bones by shortening and pulling. Okay. Tomorrow we're going to study that. For every muscle, there's one that pulls the other way. Muscles larger near the trunk, smaller as they reach limits. In fact, he didn't mention it in here, but fingers and toes don't have muscles. They have muscles that work on them, but they don't have any muscles in them. They only have receiving tendons from the hand and the forearm and the lower leg and the foot. That's a summary. If you want to read that set of paragraphs, it's in the big book too. You can. But I find his reading slow going. Now, here's what I want to emphasize. Look at the screen. This is what we're going to spend the remainder of our time on. Bones hold things up, the laws of architecture. Skeletal foundation, bones, and landmarks. You will want drawing paper and you will want to make notes. We're going to have a picture of Dr. J. Fow's skeleton, and we're going to name the bones and their proportions and their landmarks and a little bit about their joints. There's Da Vinci doing scientific research on bones. Would you like to see a Da Vinci drawing, one of his most famous drawings? Now, I don't know whether you appreciate this, but if you get in close on this thing, it is an achievement of drawing. It is so beautifully understated. In some ways, it's as simple as a cartoon. But even these two little lines are anatomical representations of the bicipital aponeurosis. You say, I don't know what that is. Got to write it down. No, don't write it down. I'm just saying, every little subtlety in there is understood thoroughly. He has hardly any shading in there. A little bit. He's got core shadow to show that the pectoralis is like a washboard. That is, it's got a plane break. This is all lit the same. This is shadow with a little reflected light in it. But the reason I want you to see it is not for the beautiful line quality and muscles. It's for the fact that underneath, there's a little bump there that we're going to talk about. It's the end of a croquet mallet. It's the medial epicondyle. That's going to be important because it's on you right there as a bump or a dimple. There is going to be a bone that we can trace from the pit of the neck out to where it meets another bone over on the other side of the shoulder. These bumps here of the serratus magnus and where they interdigitate with the external oblique that he's just whispered in there are an awareness of the rib cage. Most people don't look at that and know that he knew a lot about bones, but he took the time to name them, to observe that the wheels on the end of that femur and the kneecap in front of it and the bump on that tibia below it. We're going to study this in a few minutes. He took the time to know that, and then on the outside of it, there is a bump of another bone called the fibula, and he did it from the front, and he did it from the side, and he made notes. And that allowed him, when he draws a leg like this, to be aware of where that kneecap is. And look how there's a little plane break in there. He didn't bother to shade it. I'm shading it. And then he knows there's a bump there. That bump will be the nose of the tibia. It's right there. It's right here. Tibial tuberosity. And then he's got a couple swells around the patellar ligament that go on either side. Look at this. That is muscle, tendon of muscle, and that is bone. This is bone with muscle gripping it. Part of the reason these look so awesome is that they are knowledgeable of the bones. Here is your first project, if you have not already done it because you've been studying anatomy for a while. Memorize the skeleton. Using a skeletal chart, I'll show you an example of a skeletal chart. I'll show you several. Stan has one that's low res on the side, average proportions. That's his proportional chart that he has Richet's and Hale's and Loomis's. But you've got a front view and a side view and a back view. And then he's got one that has landmarks. We're going to take some time here to go through these landmarks, and I'm going to talk you through them. Eugene Wolf's old anatomy book, this is from maybe over 100 years ago, where he puts the skeletons inside the contours of the body. That's nice too. Any anatomical chart will give this to you. Your job is to memorize the major bones, their relative proportions, and the landmarks and joint connections. You already know about the 3 big bumps. They come first. We've spent a lot of time on them because the limbs grow out of them. The shoulder girdle we'll look at more closely, but using our proportional measurement, we know that the sternum is 1 head width. The collarbone or clavicle is 1 head width. On the back, the height of the shoulder blade or scapula is 1 head width. The width of it, if it's not foreshortened, remember it's foreshortened here a little bit, that scapula is going away from us a little bit. So that's what I mean by foreshortened. But the full length of it is about 1 head width. Wow. The shoulder blades at rest on the back, about 1 head width. We can always see a head width. It's the ball of the cranium. It's got to be about like that. Whatever we're seeing from any angle, if we can see a head, we can see the head width. Okay, those are the bones of the chest. That's the sternum. A head width, clavicle, a head width, scapula, a head height, a head width, distance between them, a head width. Oh, we also found that the pit of the neck and the ball of the head, there's about a head width between there. All right, we've covered the shoulder area for the names of the bones. Let's go down the arm bones now. The upper arm bone, which is called the humerus, is 2 head widths long. When it's not foreshortened. What about the lower arm bones? The lower arm bones are less than 2 head widths long. How much less? A little less. Can you be specific? 5/6. No, it's closer to 7/8. No, it's closer to 3/4. It's not half. It's easy enough to remember that if the humerus is a fixed length, 2 head widths, easy to measure, the forearm bones together are less. Do they have names? They have names. The important one at the elbow is the ulna. It's less than 2 head widths. We'll study it in some detail even today, but right now we're just reminding ourselves 1 upper arm bone, 2 lower arm bones, the ulna, which makes the elbow, and the radius, which offsets a little bit further down and holds the hand on the thumb side. It carries the thumb. Humerus, ulna, radius. You have no shortage of charts if you've got any anatomy book that will label those and you memorize the names. What about the hand as a whole? The hand as a whole is more than a head width, less than the forearm. Can you be specific? No. Don't need to be specific. It's just less. When it's all stretched out, it'll be less than the length of your forearm. It'll be more than a head width. Do those bones have names? Yeah, those bones have names. This little group right here, about the size of a quarter of an apple, is the carpal mass. You get carpal tunnel syndrome in that mass of bones. The ones that splay out from it but make the body of the hand are the metacarpals. Meta means above or beyond, and so they are beyond the carpals. And then the individual finger bones, which we'll look at later, are the phalanges, like a soldier in troops. Phalanges stand straight. They're relatively straight bones. Those are all of the bones of the shoulder girdle, scapula, and clavicle, shoulder blade, and collarbone. Humerus, single bone. Ulna and radius, 2 bones. Carpal mass, metacarpals, and phalanges. If you don't know those by memory already, it wouldn't be a bad idea to spend 3 to 4 hours between now and tomorrow studying all of these by name and noting how long they are relative to each other. Now, I know that this is you're seeing little tiny marks on there. The whole purpose of this is to get the context. You don't want to look in on these bones and get the subtleties where you lose where they are on the map. We're going to move to the leg bones. This upper leg bone, which is called the femur, F-E-M-U-R, is the longest bone in the body. It makes a tremendous clubbing weapon. I mean, you can hit people with the femur if you are inclined to a warrior stance. And you always grip it by this end, by the way. Get a good strong grip, and you got the heaviest part over here to hit your opponent, if you're interested. How long is that bone? Longest bone in the body? It's 3 from the very ball and socket up there, buried in there. It is 3 head widths. Okay. Does it look 3 head widths on the figure? No, it doesn't look 3 head widths on the figure because this part, which is very important to us, look at how it shows up as a depression over there. Let me switch over to red. Look at how that great trochanter of the femur, the handle of the femur, the part that is subcutaneous that you can tap, that isn't the very beginning point of the femur. So on the surface of the body, a little less than 3 head widths, but 3 head widths is fine. Just makes a long leg. We will care about how this fits into here. We'll get to that at the hip joint, and we may talk about it a little bit today. The length of the bone, the shaft of the bone, we hardly care about. A little bit, because look over here and we see that it is slightly convex to the front. It is slightly convex to the front. Its convexity to the front, when you get those muscles, those quadriceps on there, reflects. But for the most part, the 3 head width length femur of the upper leg is a single bone that will care about the bump where muscles are going to pull on the great trochanter, and we will care about the wheels of the femur. I'll show you close up after we've gone over this whole lay of the land. So if you're saying, I can hardly see it in there, it's okay. The wheels of the femur, you can tell more from the side that they're wheels. They come down here like this, and then they go like that. And then there will be a kneecap and a platform of the tibia below them. I'm giving you a close-up of what's going on in here. Those wheels of the femur are called condyles. They're important. We'll see why. But it's all one bone. The upper leg is all one bone. Then there's a kneecap. It's called the patella. It's an important landmark point. It's got a plane break. You notice that on animals too. It sticks forward. You can feel yours on you right now. Now, just like with the arm, the lower leg is two bones. The tibia, which is the big heavy bone, carries all the weight. Your fibula does not carry any weight at all. That little needle bone on the outside doesn't carry any weight. You can cut it out there and cut it out there and remove it, and you'll still be able to walk. Still be able to stand. Be more uncomfortable wiggling your toes, I'm told. I have a friend who had fibula removed, but two bones. The more important one for the weight is the tibia, the little needle bone. Now listen to this, if you don't know it already, the fibula is the needle bone. Fibula means needle. On the outside, the lateral side of the body, and it's a thin little needle that doesn't carry weight. See, we had an ulna and a radius. Here we've got a tibia and a fibula. Got two more little sets of bones. We've got a tarsal mass. We had a carpal mass in the wrist. Here we've got a tarsal mass, some metatarsals that go beyond, and some little toes called phalanges. We decided the femur is 3 head widths. The tibia and fibula, less than 3 head widths. How much less? Less. Bomis makes it equal. If you look at Bomis's proportions, he makes the length of at least the outside of the fibula, as I recall, all the way down to there. He lengthens the lower leg. I guess he just does it for convenience sake. It doesn't work that way on a human. Our tibia and fibula are always shorter than our femur. All right, folks. Your assignment. We did the major bones and their relative proportions. Now, the landmarks we need to zoom in on. But that's what we're going to do next. And the joint connections. If you already know anatomy, you may learn in this. It will not be repeat for you. Oh, wow. That is just, it's hard for me to teach from these because I'm so in love with the drawing. Let's start with the foot. Feet from the front are very difficult because they are so foreshortened. A foot from the side, because your 30-degree triangle, that protractor measure, maybe a little more on some people, it could be 40 degrees. You get old, and it starts to flatten out to 25 degrees. But that side view lets us see it. Soon as we put that side view into perspective, we're going to run into some trouble, and I'm not going to solve all that for you right now. To orient you, we will come back to hands and feet and see some of their basic forms later. But let's look at Bridgman. Bridgman shows us that the lower leg comes down to create an ankle. Our eye is below this. We're looking up at the building. The building is leaning back a little bit. Look how we're looking up at that building, and it's got a little pole with a curve like that. And then that's an inside view. That's a medial view. Medial means it's the inside, not the outside of your body, but toward the center line where your big toe is, and the ball of the foot is, and the arch is. If this is the big toe side, that means this has got to represent an ankle bone, which is a lower leg bone of the tibia. Okay. One thing he shows us is that the foot, which is designed as architecture, it is designed to hold weight, is an arch that the weight comes down, what would you say, 2/3 to 3/4? Certainly back. Here it goes about 3/4. Here he's bringing it to about 1/3, but we do know this, it's not at the halfway point, because we are forward-moving animals, and when you move forward a lot, you don't want to fall over. So we've got a thing that sticks out there that gives us some leverage, and when we pull down on muscles to go this way, it helps propel us forward. That's tomorrow when we talk about machinery. Here's what we care about. From a side, if you want to draw a foot from the side, something like this, to think of those bones, is not a bad idea. It's an arch with a pillar coming down on it. That's the inside view. This tibia, that represents the tibia, big toe side. And the bones inside there, there's a network of them, the tarsal mass. A very important one will be that heel bone, the calcaneus. There's 7 bones in there. We don't see them as a group. We see little bits of them sticking out. We'll see that heel bone, and then there will be bones that come out to go into toe bones. You'll find that in the book. I just want you to see the ratio is back here. Now, let's go to a front view and see what he does. He says, we're seeing something else now. Look how on the outside, what bone would this one be? Fibula. That's the fibula. It's the thin needle bone on the outside. And here's something that always happens, and it's very useful. The fibula goes lower than the tibia. So the outside of the ankle is lower. The inside of the ankle is higher. They will be like a crescent wrench. If you know that the bump on either side, outside or inside of an ankle, is that low, if that's the outside, you know that the other one is going to be higher. Tibia higher, fibula lower. That's a construction line. And the foot moves in here as if it were a hinge. It is quite a hinge. In fact, we'll see when you do, if you think of it, if you think of the ankle bones as a kind of a crescent wrench, like this, it will grip a spool, like so, for that tarsal mass. And that would have to be the fibula, the outside, and this would have to be the tibia, the inside, because the fibula is lower. Bridgman is turning complex anatomy into the simplest diagram he can. That's not a complete crescent wrench, see? I was drawing it more like this. Lower leg bones gripping tarsal mass. Hey, it's not just a hinge. It also goes left to right and right to left. And here he's turning from straight lines into more organic lines. And here he's moving from a crescent wrench idea to a kind of a fist gripping it, more organic. We had it from the toe side. We took the toe and went like this. Now we've got a front view. Tough to get, but cross contours will help define it. Now let's take that big toe and move it this way and take a look at what it looks like from the outside. Oh, okay. This would be what bone here? It's the fibula, because we're on the little toe side, so we know that over on that other side, that tibia will be a little higher. And now he's really showing us the hinge quality of this. That we've got the lower leg bones going that way, and the foot bones going like this. And then he's got the lower leg bones going that way, and the foot bones going like this. So we've got a hinge joint that also has some side-to-side play. That's something worth knowing for tomorrow when we get to the machinery of this. Look at those beautiful feet. What are the landmark points? I told you we were going to do landmark points. The fibula is a landmark point. You can tap it on the outside of your foot right now. The tibia on the big toe side of your foot is the other side of that wrench. Those are both tappable. They are landmark points. There's the tibia on the inside. On the outside of the foot, there's a landmark point. It's the tuberosity of the metatarsal, of the fifth metatarsal. We'll get to it. If you care about that, there's a little bump. A little bump. It's almost too small to see there, but you can kind of see it there. That is evident on a fleshed figure. And here, he shows that there is a kind of a dimple there, because there's a double-bellied muscle on the side of that. Any others? Yeah. This is the metatarsal phalangeal joint. On your big toe side, there's a ball of the foot, as people call it. You can feel it right now. It's bone up against the skin. That's a landmark point. And the entire back or dorsal side of the foot, those bones are right underneath the skin. They've got tendon over them. All of the toe bones, same thing. The bones are mostly foot on top. That's why we zero in on them. Study those bones, not the details. Study them like this. Fibula on the outside, tibia over on the inside, 3/4 of the way back, an arch like this. All of that is pretty much going to be tappable. Some of it won't be. Coming down there, tibia on the inside, big calcaneus heel bone, aims down, the peak of it goes up there, arch goes down. You can tap that, get your feet out and feel them. On the right, it's harder. But that's got to be the tibia, and that's got to be the fibula. So the tibia is higher, fibula is lower. There's a spool in there, and then these are going to foreshorten toward us. Something that will be three-dimensional like that coming toward us. That's what you'll need to know, the names of those groups. When you're studying proportion, always go macro for every micro that you've done. Whenever you've been in here worrying about, somebody asked the first time we met, how big is the foot? If you use that as a pivot point, it will never go higher than the center, the middle height of the lower leg. So we pull that out, and we figure like that and like that. Oh, this is going to have to be longer. Let's look at that femur and the condyles and talk about them. No, we'll take a little more because we're going to do the knee here. The knee is mostly bone. The femur is longer than the lower leg bones. It's longer than any bones. And The great trochanter is a landmark. Gotta know it. From level, just like the ear, it's about level with the groin, the symphysis pubis. But of course, if the symphysis pubis is here and it's way back here, it's a lot like an ear. That you could lift your pelvis up and that would go down. You could tip your pelvis down and that would go up because it's so far out laterally. Okay, once you have that landmark point, then you'd say, whatever 3 head widths distance is, I'll find the knee. It may be foreshortened. We'll look at it foreshortened very soon. But the wheels of the femur, these things right here, they go back there like that because, as Bridgman will show us, this tibia will bend. It will go back there. And so this needs to be roundish. He doesn't show it roundish here. But the condyles of the femur are round. Here they are from the back, and you can see, we can imagine them. I'm gonna scooch it over to the side so you can see it as kind of a round portion of a donut in there. Let's see, what do we got? That's got to be a femur. That's a patella. How big is the patella? It's this big. It's the size of your thumb and index finger coming together. It's bigger than an eyeball, unless you've got particularly small patellas. And forget about this muscle. That's a quadricep tendon. And we'll forget about, well, actually, no, we'll talk about this tendon. That's actually, in fact, it's a tendon, but they call it the patellar ligament. When we bend, now you see the wheels of the femur. Let me show you what we're looking at here. If that femur is coming toward us like this, there comes a point where the end of it goes like that, and that would be the ellipse that would represent. That is this end of the ellipse. It's coming toward us. And then we've got a kneecap, and the kneecap is 3-dimensional. It's a little convex to the front, so it's got some thickness. And that's what he's showing us here. And it's going to have a tendon on it that's like a watch strap that will go over to the other side, and a patellar ligament which will hook into a bump on the nose of the tibia. Look at this bump of the nose of the tibia. Look at this tibial tuberosity is what it's technically called. There it is. There it is. From your pelvis, you have got a muscle that will come down and go into a tendon that will pull on that patella. Well, what good does that do? The patella is connected to that nose of the tibia. There it is. And so when this muscle pulls up, it pulls on that patella, which pulls the lower leg forward, and it straightens the leg. But of course, the leg can pull back, and that's why this has to be round. All right. The condyles of the femur on a knee can be tapped on the, let's see, is that a left knee or a right knee? I want you to figure it out. The evidence is all there. How do you know it's a left knee? Because the fibula is on the outside. Which means if it's facing you, this has got to be on our right, it's their left. Yeah. That's on the outside, lateral. This is medial. Big toe will be on this side. Little toe will be on that side. Good observation. Look at what Bridgman does when he draws a knee. Look at how he actually puts in the medial condyle. What is that? Let's go back. The medial condyle is this portion of the bone. This portion of the bone. Hey, he's going to put in the lateral condyle. Those wheels are wide. He's going to put in the medial platform. It's called the goose foot. And he might even put in that fibula. Let's see if all of those landmark points show up on a Bridgman knee. They sure do. Every one of them's there. That is the medial condyle. That is the lateral condyle underneath that tissue. It's quite blocky. This is the medial side of the platform of the tibia. This is the lateral side, and then the head of the fibula on the outside will have this tendon that aims for it right about there. Bridgman's aware of all of those bumps. They are used to construct a knee. Now, we could talk more about this. We might when we get to legs. There's errors in the book. This is an error. The spool of the wheel of the condyle is not bigger on the inside. He's got this thing deeper on the inside, and it's actually the opposite of that. The spool on the inside is less deep than the one on the outside, and there's a reason for that. There's going to be a muscle over here that's got to fit into that smaller area. It will be called the vastus medialis. But if you tap the outside of your knee, do it right now. Bend your knee and then tap the outside plane, and you'll find that it's very bony there. That's because I'll do it over here, those condyles of the femur, the outside condyle, the outside spool, which you can tap, is subcutaneous. The inside, if you tap the inside of your knee, it'll be fleshier. So there's a little discrepancy here with the bones. If this is too tough for you, look what we've got. This is what we do next. This is where we're going. We're just trying to do something that works. Remember the thing about wheels? Remember that if you've got a wheel on the ground and we're looking down at that wheel on the ground and it's going like that all of those X lines will go in the same direction. If one X line goes like this, and that's a hinge joint, and this is enough of a hinge joint, then that means wherever we take that leg, let's do it. We put that wheel of the femur, that's a condyle, see? It actually sticks out beyond that. And then below it, if there's a tibia, and let's make the tibia go back here. He did it so it's coming straight forward. If we see that tibia as a form, even though this line tips like that, these all go off in one direction. That happens on movement in the sagittal plane. If that's all you do when you do your form skeletons, that's good enough. Bridgman has these bones in his book. He's got all the leg bones. I don't know that they're the best to study from. They're quite abstracted. They're marvelous looking legs to me. I love what he's doing with the muscles. Tomorrow we're going to talk about that quadriceps group that pulls. They pull this way to straighten the leg. How do you bend the leg? A group of hamstrings, a two-headed bicep, and two muscles on the inside. Those pull this way, and they'll pull the leg into flexion. But that's for tomorrow. Muscles move the bones. How do we stand up on our toes? Well, we've got to pull that up, and this huge muscle grips and pulls this way and tugs on there, and then we go up on our toes. And then there'll be another group here that does the opposite. It'll spread out into our toes, and it will lift the foot up and also help wiggle it. When we look at them from the front, we're going to see that we have, as we had on the torso, we have an external oblique in a sense and an internal oblique. Actually, it's the other way around. This would be like the internal oblique. That would be the external oblique. This would be more like the internal one. For the ankles, they go. And those will pull and they'll spin. They'll spin the leg around. And then we have those quadriceps coming right at us to straighten the leg. And then the one hamstring that's coming out from behind, that will flex it, but it's all foreshortened. And then we'll find we will have a group that will split into a number of tendons, extensors. And then this is all bone all the way down. Let's go back to the Da Vinci. I want you to see the last thing about that tibia. The inside of your shin bone, all the way down there, is all subcutaneous. You can tap it inside of your shin bone, medial side, tap it all the way down, and there will be a calf muscle behind it. Let's look at how the great Leonardo, was aware of it. Down to that ankle, all along there, subcutaneous bone. So is that a landmark? It's a land area. I'll color it all in here blue. It's quite foreshortened on the front because we're looking along it, but it's all there. Okay, I think we're done with the leg and the knees. Let's take 5 minutes, maybe 10, on the shoulders and arm. When it comes to this rib cage that we've done that doesn't look anything like an upper body, well, one reason it doesn't look anything like an upper body is that an upper body has a lot on it. And from the back, one thing we care about is that if it's facing this way, where we see more of this side, we have a set of very large guitar picks that are three-dimensional. We can make them like that, and this one faces very much toward us. The other one can't go out here. It has to wrap around. We have to have some sense of the roundness of that rib cage. And that means that the same thing might be quite foreshortened, like this, as it wraps around. This can move. It can go from this position to where the muscles over on the other side, the serratus magnus will take it from this position and lift the arm so that the angle of the vertebral border changes. Here is the big point about shoulder blades. They move. They're about the size of your hand. If this guy had a hand, and we'll put the hand in a position about like this. That's the entire hand. Big. That's about the size of the shoulder blade. Well, what about arms? If this character has an arm, that humerus, what do we do with that humerus? The humerus is a croquet mallet. I'll elaborate for a couple minutes here. This croquet mallet on our left is going to come toward us, like so. This croquet mallet, the humerus is how long? 2 head widths, but it's going to be less than 2 head widths if it's foreshortened. But it's a croquet mallet. Now, this bump in here, the medial epicondyle, like the femur had condyles, The humerus has little condyles on the condyles, that little bump on the inside. Look at how Bridgman knows it. It's a landmark point. That is this bump on the inside, and then we'll have an ulna that will come toward us, and a radius that might cross over it and hold the thumb side of the hand. Or it could be that this arm is bent and that ulna, this was going away from us. Now that ulna is coming toward us. And from the outside to the thumb side would be out there in this case. And as we study those, we're going to find that the humerus and the ulna make a hinge joint. So let me just turn it toward us a little bit. This will be the humerus. It's a ball and socket joint up there in the shoulder girdle. And we're going to make the croquet mallet coming toward us. And then if we've got an ulna in a position like this, it grips. It grips as a hinge joint around here. So that when the triceps pull, it straightens the arm. And when the biceps and brachialis pull, it flexes the arm. So we've got two important landmarks on the elbow. One of them is the medial epicondyle. That would be this bump. The other would be the ulna, which makes the elbow. That is the forearm bone that goes from the elbow to the little finger side. It's this bone. The radius crosses over it, and that's kind of tough. But let me show you that Bridgman has one of the best descriptions of it in any book I know. I love this. He shows that, okay, first of all, let's see if you how close attention you've been paying. I'm going to quiz you here. What is the bone, this bone that goes thick at the elbow to thin the little finger side of the wrist? It's the ulna. What is the bone that goes thin at the elbow and goes big to hold the body of the hand? Anyone know? That's got to be the radius. Those are the two. Why do we care about the separate bones? Because when you hold your palm forward, that's called supination, and you can take that palm and cross it over like this so that you hold the back of your hand forward and the radius made the movement. The ulna stayed right where it was. The radius is a swiveling joint on the z-axis. It revolves around the z-axis. It revolves around the depth of the arm like that. The ulna is a hinge joint that rotates on the x-axis, the hinge joint of a wheel, the rolling joint of a Gatling gun. The thing I like about this is no other book that I've ever seen, maybe Peck might have picked it up, actually took a Home Depot hinge joint to make the point that that's what kind of joint you've got at the elbow. The bones of the hand are important. He's got all sorts of wonderful hands, hard to study from them. They're so quirkily him, but they're great looking. There's a landmark point that's really important. It's a little bone on the base of the little finger side of the hand. It's called the pisiform bone, the heel of the hand, Horses, it's the size of a golf ball. And look what Bridgman does with it in drawings like this. That's the little finger side of the hand. And there is a tendon of a muscle, flexor carpi ulnaris, on the ulna side that goes to that base of the little finger side of the hand and pulls it to pull the whole hand forward. See, on a horse, on the forequarters of a horse, you've got a pisiform bone the size of a golf ball right there. And there is a tricep in there, an elbow there. Watch this. Here's what I wanted to show you. That golf ball size pisiform bone, you've got a muscle and a tendon that aim down to that and then cut in. Why? Why is it so big? Because when that pulls this way, it will help propel the horse forward. Well, we have it. Not so big and impressive, but look at how important it becomes in drawing the base of a little finger side of a hand. The pisiform bone is tucked in there. There it is. That's a landmark point. What else on the hand? Oh, the entire carpal mass. The entire carpal mass is there's 8 bones in there. Like a quarter of an apple, somebody said. Sliced into a quarter of an apple. And you shrink wrap the hand and you see that. That bump is the end of the ulna. This is that one that was so big up at the elbow. This is the radius that comes in there to hold the carpal mass. Excuse me. I'm not sure how he's got that position. It looks odd. It looks like he's got an extra bump in there. This is the ulna. Little finger side. That's the radius. Now, we could do much more. I just can't resist, though. When you see all this detail, and you say, how does that relate to the drawing? Look at how Bridgman makes that beach ball. And you can sense that a line on there would then go like this. A line on there would then go like that. These cannonball shoulders connect with it like that. He is aware of the bones underneath. And that's what we're seeking to do, is that when you do sketches, when you do knees like this, those are beautiful knees. And look how he knows that that's bone down to there. Then he picks up this one, little bump in there, foreshortened, core shadows and reflected light. Skeletons as foundations. Here's your next assignment. Here's your assignment beyond the memorize a skeleton. Using your favorite Bridgmans, draw stick figures based on bones. Look at them and try to do something. If you're a beginner, as simple as that. Try to turn them into something that may be childlike. It's not three-dimensional yet, but do you see how if you can turn these things into, if that is something going away from me, then it would explain why it's so short. If this is coming toward me, and as you look at the plates, this might be going away from me. It might be going down like that. And do this with all the energy you want to put into it. I got permission from Gabriella the first year that I had students do this, about 10 years ago, online, to look at bodies. Gabriella did not do these from skeletons. We studied skeletons in class. She did them from photographs of people. Rachel did these. These are sophisticated. So it's too sophisticated. I can't do that well. Go back to the stick figures. This can be fun. The assignment is draw stick figures based on skeletons. Name them. Color the landmark points blue or whatever. The parts that you know are going to affect the figure. Got one more issue here. I hope you learned. Bones as forms and the skeletal foundation. That's what we did today. My suggestion to you is memorize the bones so you know them all. And try to think of their proportions and how when they move toward you, they change. And you can do that by doing the project. And then tomorrow, we'll talk about how they move. They move by muscles pulling on them. Then we're going to go back to them. Hip and leg, shoulder and arm, hands and feet. But we're trying to get a holistic view first. Some of you have mentioned that you're dreaming in Bridgman. Yeah, once we're starting to dream in these forms, it means they're in us. So the work is to get them out of us, and that's the boot camp part. That's where you have to work it out. Okay, see you tomorrow. That was session 8 on bones. If you want more, subscribe to my announcement list at martialart.com.